Hi guys, it's Kathy here with Art Zone. I'm going to show you our Christmas truck and tree. You can see I started by painting my background gray. I usually encourage you to do that twice. So paint it gray, let it dry, take 5-10 minutes, or use a blow dryer. If you're using a blow dryer, make sure that you're not holding it super close to the painting, kind of hold it a little bit away on a low setting. But you're going to want to paint that gray twice to give it a nice even overall coverage. And then we're ready to make this gridded pattern if you'd like to make the grid behind it, kind of representing window panes. So we've sent you strips of paper. You could always make them thinner if you want it to be a little bit closer to this one. This one was pretty thin. These guys are a little thick, but we'll go ahead and use them anyways. You decide if you want to measure and place them out, or if you just want to go for it. I always encourage you just to go for it. Decide where you want them. You'll want to tape them down. And then we'll take some across. Now I've already used these once, so they're not going to lay as flat as I'd like, but they will still do what I need them to do. Make sure your tape is not on the canvas. That will show up when we start doing that blue. We're going to use what's called a dry brush to apply the blue. So I'm going to take my larger of my brushes. And I'm going to take it and get some of the blue on the brush. But then I'm going to find either a towel, or maybe like here I've got some extra paper. I'm going to fan that blue out just to kind of dry it up so it's not globbed on there. And if you look pretty close, it's not, I don't have a whole lot left. To dry brush it, now I'm going to take it and I'm just going to lightly brush my blue back and forth. Sometimes you'll realize maybe you need it a little bit more. Make sure that you are actually getting all the way into those squares and kind of going back and forth. You decide how much of this color you're wanting to add, but you really need to add it right next to that paper. Otherwise, when we remove these grid, you're not going to be able to see it. And this might take a little bit of play back and forth. You could even dip into your gray at times and come back through and add it back on top until you get it brushed in there the way you want, kind of that antiquing effect. This one, I even took a roller brush on my original and I did the same thing, to where I got some of the blue on the roller brush, but then I rolled it to get some off, and then I simply rolled back and forth over my grid to create my background. So play with that, get it the way you want, and then we're ready to add the truck. You have to kind of decide if you're going to add anything else to this painting. I've left the sky open so that you could add words, greetings, maybe happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Maybe you'll add your last name. It could be a greeting at your door. Let this dry. It shouldn't take very long since it is a dry brush method. Let's get this. I already have a finished version of this grid. So now I will be ready to add the truck. You won't need those strips of paper anymore, so you can get rid of them. What if I flip this over? I've got a version already for us to start on that truck. At this point, you're going to need your stencil. You have two stencils. This is the detailed of the inner part of the truck, and then here you'll have the outline of the truck and the tree. So let's start with that big outline. Once again, decide where it's going to go on that, if it's going up in the center and then you don't want to add words, or if you want to go lower so that you can add words. This one I'm just going to go more towards the center. Now we have sent you a roller. I like to use the roller on the truck itself. When you are using that roller, you might have to dump some of the paint out onto a plate. You really don't want to glob. If you get there, see that's kind of globbed on. We don't want that. You want to roll it down on a plate to kind of spread it out, or like right here, I've got some extra paper so I can roll that paint around until I get a nice even coverage. Kind of keep going until you get that paint ready to use. There we go. When you are rolling, you don't want to push very hard with that roller. If you do, you're going to take that paint right underneath your stencil, and then you'll have a lot of edging to fix. So take some time. Completely fill in with red. Try to avoid the tree. That's the only spot that I'm not going to fill in. Now, yes, you could roller in the tree, or you can use a paintbrush. Now, I always get just a little bit into the tree area. It's not going to completely cover up all of the details of the truck that I want just yet, because it's going to take some layering, which we're going to mix some other colors into our truck anyway, so it'll be okay. This is just going to give us the outline of our truck and tree. So once I have my truck done, I'll switch to a paintbrush and get some of that green. When you are using a stencil with a paintbrush, you really have to pay attention to wiping away from the stencil so that you're not sending the paint right underneath your stencil. And it's okay if it accidentally gets into your truck at times. This is just giving us an outline anyways. So take some time, get that filled in, and then you're gonna wanna let it dry. Don't leave your stencil on as it's drying. If your stencil's there, it will dry to your canvas or your paper, and then you'll have some more touch-ups to do, so we don't want that. Now I already have this version done and dry, so I'm going to switch this out, and hopefully yours looks something like this to start with. It's just that basic outline. You could always walk away, let it dry, come back to it. There's no hurry, so take your time. I like to go and work on the truck first, and I like to add some brown into my red to kind of give it a little bit more of an aging. So I'll take my paintbrush and dip into some brown and into some red, and then go back through and just kind of add this back and forth. You, of course, can go as dark as you want, blending those two together. That's going to help give it a little bit more interest. Now we we do have a second stencil we're going to use here in a minute. You can see I've gone over my tree a few more times too to really give it a little bit more. But even with my tree, so now I've got that brown mixed in with my red. Now I'm going to go to my tree. I'm going to do a little bit of the same. I'm going to take some green and get just a tiny bit more brown. And this time, instead of going back and forth, I'm going to go up and down, and I'm going to use the real thin part of my paintbrush up and down of my tree. Don't worry if you get too much brown in there, because we can cover that up. I'm going to make sure that that tree is completely touching my truck. And then at times, add more green on top. And give it a little bit more interest this way. So it's not just one flat green, kind of like in nature. You're going to see dark and light areas of everything. Now, once again, give it time to dry, and then you're ready for the detail of the truck. To do that, you're going to want to tape it down. Just kind of line it up there. I'm not actually going to pay attention to the bottom of the tires much. I'm just going to pay attention to the windows and kind of get an idea of everything else. This part's really usually kind of fun to kind of play with. Adding some more details. Tape it down the best you can. And then we're ready to slowly start adding things in. To these areas, some people I've seen add black into them, and that looks really great. I've chosen to add that darker brown, but I like to mix the brown with the red, so it's not completely brown, but it will kind of darken my red in those areas and make them easier to see. So I'll come back through and just lightly go over it. Sometimes I'll even take just a tiny bit of black, mix it into that red again. It's just going to darken these areas, make them easier to see these details. That's the bumper and stuff. We'll come back to that. Adding all these little details. And then I'll switch and do the windows. You see I've mixed some of the gray into the white. Play with that. Right in here. Add that window in. Just be careful that you're not putting so much paint on that it's going underneath your stencil. Those are always kind of hard to fix. And I can always come back and add more white into that later. But I'm going to go ahead and switch down here to just gray and show where that bumper and everything is. Looks like I need some black for my tires. Is if it does go underneath your stencil, we can always fix it. You just have to let it dry some. So that's going to give us all those outlines that we're going to need. And then you'll peel that off. And you're going to want to switch to your much smaller paintbrushes at this point. Details. Go ahead and let those come back through on those tires and round them out just a little bit more because that stencil does get in the way. course down there is going to be snow, so I don't have to worry too much. Stencil always lets my tire get a little bigger than I want. We can always use some snow on all that. Come back to that front bumper. Have to be careful, hopefully it's not all wet. It looks like a little bit of that tire black wants to come into the bumper, but that's fine. It'll almost do a little bit of shading if you let it go. And I also like to come back and add a little bit to this back bumper area. Now, since there's a lot of gray in our background, you will want to pay attention, make sure they're not exactly the same. You might have to add a little bit more black or a little bit more white, whichever way you want to go, into that bumper so that you can see the difference. And now we're ready to add inside for your hubcaps and stuff. And it's really nice if the black is still just a little wet, because then they start to mix together some, and that provides some of that shading that you're looking for. And we're ready for snow. This one's really not as hard as it might have appeared. Coming through here and trying to highlight where that snow is hitting the top of that tree. Really trying to use the tip of your paintbrush and barely touching. I take it and I'm just kind of going back and forth real randomly. And then sometimes I'll come through and even add some as you want. Some people even like to add a little bit of snow here to that truck bed. And some have even added some snow up on top of their truck. We definitely want to add some snow down here. Have some fun with that. You decide where all the snow is going to be. If you're going to add any words. I hope you guys enjoyed painting, and we look forward to painting with you again